A is a British architect Norman Foster. Grew up in Manchester, England, and works in London.
I am B. B is a Chinese architect, Wang Shu. B grew up in Beijing and works in Hangzhou.
One day they meet.
Hello, I'm Norman Foster. Nice to meet you.
Hi, I'm Wang Shu. Nice to meet you. Hello, Mr. Foster. Where did you live in England during your childhood?
Hello, Mr. Wang. This is Manchester, where I grew up. I spent my high school and university here. It used to be an industrial city, and there used to be a large number of workshops here. Since 1960, there has been an intense urban regeneration. A lot of new buildings replaced the old ones.
The cities in England have also changed intensely. However, context of the local culture can still be seen.
Yes, isn't that true of your city?
Our cities have also undergone intense urban regeneration, but the results have not been good. Firstly, let's talk about the city where you work now.
I'm now working mainly in London, Mr. Wang. You should be familiar with London too.
Yes, it's a world city. The Great Fire of 1666 affected the city a lot, I think. But many 17th century buildings have been well preserved, and the city is still very much a part of British culture.
Yes, there are very few buildings in central London that predate 1666, but there are survivors such as Hampton Court Palace, a Tudor-era palace.
How wonderful, a valuable cultural heritage.
Let's talk about your city.
Okay.
Where did you live before, Mr. Wang?
I spent my childhood and high school in Beijing and Xi'an. Both cities are very old. You should be more familiar with Beijing. Look, this is the Forbidden City, the oldest cultural heritage of our city. But a lot of historical heritage like this could have been preserved. China's rapid urbanization has made those cultural heritage disappear, and the cities within Chinese characteristics are not preserved. Instead, there are a lot of modern buildings that are in line with the economic development and adapted to the life of a larger population.
Yes, it's a loss for humanity. A city with history disappeared in the urbanization.
Couldn't agree more, but you know what? Along with urbanization, the Chinese design of architecture and the Chinese elements of the city are also not preserved.
I can understand why you're saying the unique Chinese architecture design, but it might not be in line with urban development anymore.
Yes, Mr. Foster, I agree with you that traditional Chinese architecture is no longer compatible with urbanization. But don't you think there is a deep cultural inequality in it?
How so?
Modernist architecture and the discipline of architecture are a complete set of Western design methods, a logic adapted to Western sites and cultures. There's not a trace of Chinese indigenous in it. And today, all Chinese architects use this same way to design for Chinese cities. You can't even see that you are in China in a Chinese city. 1,000 cities look the same.
Oh, Mr. Wang, I probably understand, but still don't quite understand. Where's the inequality?
Mr. Foster, don't you see? You don't even realize that all this is not equal anymore. It's profound inequality. It's cultural colonialism. Chinese architecture should have its own identity and should reflect its own culture. We don't want to be followers of Western culture. Chinese culture is equal to Western culture in architectural design, and I want to have a Chinese part in the discipline of architecture.
Oh yes, this question is worth my reflection.
Of course, what I said about Chinese architecture reflecting its own culture, not every building has to be like traditional Chinese architecture. It is true that traditional Chinese architecture is not in line with industrial construction, it's not economical, and it's not conducive to urbanization. However, some elements of Chinese culture and some of the imagery of the city in Chinese culture can be reflected in modern architecture.
That's interesting. Are there any better examples?
I will show you. Mr. Foster, this is Hangzhou. My studio is here, and this is the main site where I engage in my architectural practice.
I can't wait to see some of your practice.
This is the campus of the architecture department of the China Academy of Art. Take a look. When I design, I use a lot of Chinese garden design theory. The circulation of the interior is very interesting. Also, I pay a lot of attention to the human scale. The highest point of the building is only 20 meters, which is the height of a tree. Once the Chinese people lived in such an environment.
Architecture is not the main body of the environment. It is dominated by the landscape. People often interact with the landscape. Can I understand it in that way?
Mr. Foster, you summed it up very well. Let me show you my recent project again. It's a museum to preserve the original of some precious books.
Let me see. It is indeed very different. The building itself is in the line with the modern construction process. It also looks very modern and has a lot of traces of Chinese culture. I seem to understand what you are saying. Chinese architecture can be very modern too. It doesn't have to be like our cities.
Yes, there are many other good cases. Whether an architecture is modern or not has nothing to do with China or the West. But it is very late. Chinese cities have lost all traces of their originality. A lot of urban context have disappeared. Therefore, Chinese culture should be equal to Western culture in architectural design. The discipline of architecture should embrace Chinese culture and Chinese architectural techniques.
You have a point. I don't think Chinese culture is not equal to Western culture. It's true that architecture should consider the local context and respect the local culture, but it's really difficult for an international group like ours. However, it is worth trying.
Thank you. Thank your efforts for cultural diversity and cultural equality.